Hi there, and welcome to another edition of the 1% Better podcast with your host, Rob O'Donoghue.
Hello there, and welcome to 2019 and the 1% Better podcast. It's 2019 as I record this intro, so I think it's only right and fitting that I welcome you into this new calendar year. I hope you've got over the holiday season in one piece. I hope it went well. I hope you got time to relax, maybe enjoy some podcasts, take it easy, indulge, set yourself up for success in 2019, whatever that looks like. If you've set some goals and called out some New Year's resolutions that you'd like to follow, I hope you're still on track. If you're not, that's okay too. There's a long way to go in the year. Get back on the horse, start again, and do them for the right reasons. Make sure they're ones you're passionate about, you have an emotional connection with, and you enjoy them. I believe that's very important when you're setting goals, that there's an emotive element as well as the structural, logical, rational piece. Anyway, enough about that. I have released some podcasts over the holiday season, and it would be great if you wanted to check those out as well. Talking about books, a solo show around books I read in 2018 that have had an impact on me, that made me improve, get better. That's been going down quite well. Wasn't sure how to structure it, but it seems to be well received, so check it out. I think it's episode 89. I've also put out an episode around the unexpected benefits of podcasting. I put an article together about that a while back. That's out, and the audio from this is coming from the podcast day, International Podcast Day presentation I did, so maybe you want to check it out. The key connection to goals is very important. So many good things come out of following the path to whatever goal you're chasing, not just the outcome at the end or the result, but so many really interesting learnings come along the way. So that's the essence of that podcast. Maybe have a listen to it, you could get something out of it. And then one around core values. It is an approach I've sort of put together through trial and error, through personal experience, how to identify what your core values are and how to use them when making decisions. When making tough, challenging decisions, they can be of great value to you and help you guide yourself into the right direction. So I've shared a couple of those over the holiday season. They are solo efforts, stuff that I've had recorded for a while, stuff that I really wanted to get out there, and again, hopefully you can take something from them, apply it into your own approaches, methods, and help you improve and get better. So that's been a wrap up of the last couple of weeks for me, and as I release this episode, I'm getting quite close to wrapping up season 2 of the podcast. Thankfully, I don't have anyone telling me when to cut season 2 and start season 3. As a solo independent podcaster, I kind of set my own schedule, but I have a couple of episodes I do want to wrap the season up with. I'm already recording some shows for season 3 and they are coming out really good. Some really exciting guests lined up for that. I've been putting together a guest wish list for the season 3, and probably getting ahead of myself, setting the bar high and going after some names that I would love to talk with. So we'll see what comes out of that, but I have a number lined up already, and I will probably end season 2, take a few weeks off, and then start season 3. In 2018, I took a couple of months off, but I don't think I'll take that long this time around because I really just want to keep the momentum going, keep sharing these conversations, and I have some ideas of how to tweak how I release podcasts going forward. I learned a lot through doing the other podcast, the 864, so I might streamline the process going forward. It'll be easier for me to get more out. But more to come on that. Okay, that's enough of that. So this interview is one I recorded probably early November, and my guest is Bernardo Cubria. I'm trying to get that right. During the episode I've made a good attempt of it, but Bernardo will pronounce his surname way better than I ever can. So Bernardo is an actor, he's a writer, he was a podcaster, he writes plays, he has many strings to his bow. He's starred in shows in the US like The Good Wife, The Sitting Man. He's been in movies, he was in Blue Bloods. We had a very interesting conversation. This is kind of a fun listen, but there's lots of insights. You can really get a good sense of the type of person Bernardo is. We recorded it, funnily enough, as Bernardo was driving to an audition. It's the first time I ever interviewed anyone while they were on the go. We talked about the audition that Bernardo was driving to, how he prepared for that, but we also talked about acting. We also talked about Hollywood and how life is really over there and how Bernardo buys into it or doesn't. As you'll hear, some of the key takeaways touch on human rights, subconscious, the value of feedback, trust, authenticity, resilience. They're kind of keywords that probably sum up Bernardo and sum up his approach to life. I hope you enjoy it, and we are kicking off 2019 with a fun one. Take care and enjoy the show with Bernardo Cubria. I'm always talking about firsts for the show at the start, when there is a first in actual fact. And in this one, I'm pretty confident to say I haven't interviewed somebody before as they were driving, and while I'm recording on video as well, for folks that might want to watch it, you can see my guest is Bernardo Cubria. Is it Cubria is the right pronunciation? Cubria?
That's very good. My mom says Cubria if you want to get very Mexican about it, but you did a good job.
I did okay. So brilliant.
Yeah.
So Bernardo, maybe for the folks listening and maybe those watching, tell us a bit about yourself, and actually tell us right now what's happening in your life or what you're doing.
So this is very annoying and very actory, and I understand if people don't want to listen to me after this, but I was sitting at home getting ready to do this interview, and then I got a call from my agent that there was a last-minute audition for the role of police officer. And so I had to jump in my car, and now I'm driving, and I will read you the line. The line is, "Give us a call if you find anything."
Okay.
That's it, ladies and gentlemen.
That's the line.
I am now driving. That's the line. And I am now driving to go say that line along with probably 50 other people.
Okay. And
then hopefully they decide that I say that line the best.
Well, you've done a pretty good rehearsal of it there, I think. Do you have more context for the actual...
Oh, thank you.
Do you have more context for the part of the movie that it's in, or no, you don't know? Is it in a kind of a heated environment, or...
No, I know that I'm in someone's living room and they have their arms folded, and I say, "Give us a call if you hear anything." So I imagine I'm there getting a report.
Okay.
But that's it. That's my inspiration.
Very, very cool.
So this is the kind of thing that when you become an actor, nobody warns you that your life will become a lot of moments like this. So
and you're driving to that location now. Have you kind of a time? So do you have 50 minutes to get there? Is there kind of are you under severe pressure to is this commonplace?
No. It is commonplace that happens, but I can get there in 2 hours. But what I am now doing is I need to go buy a razor and shave my face. So after you and I finish, I will get a razor at a store, probably pop into a Starbucks, shave my face in the Starbucks,
right.
and then do semi-comb my hair and go inside and say the line.
All right.
So,
it doesn't sound like you're getting too...
There you go.
You don't get nervous before these things, so you get so used to it, I guess. It's just kind of like another activity you take on during the day.
Well, if it was a larger role, I would be very nervous, because then I would have to learn all those lines and prepare and actually kind of create a human being, right?
Right.
But with this, there is no nerve, because I'm just going to go say this one line, and I understand the lottery of it, which is they're just going to be like, "Oh, that guy's too tall," or "that guy," I will. If I book this, it will have nothing to do with talent or skill.
Is it? What's the movie? Do you know? Is it a big movie? Is it a?
It's a new TV show.
Oh, okay.
I swear, traffic has stopped. This is terrible that I'm doing this right now. It's a new television show. It is called "Are You Sleeping?" I'm probably not allowed to share that, but I mean, what am I spoiling really by sharing that line? But the show is called "Are You Sleeping?" I don't think it's been on yet, so we'll see.
Okay, very good.
But yeah,
well,
yes, sir.
Best of luck with that. A good way to start the show to kind of to give us a the real time update of what's going on in your world.
Okay.
So the typical flow of the show, as you probably know, is we kind of look for areas in the guests' careers and lives that they've been challenged, I suppose, and areas that they've come out the other side, and how they've done that, and how they've actually improved, how they've got a little bit better, right? So when we chatted last week and kind of just had our offline conversation, I was interested to hear that, where you're at now in this kind of world of acting was certainly not on your radar in the early days. So maybe talk to me a bit about, who you were growing up, what was that like, and what you were ambitious about at that stage.
Well, I grew up in a Mexican home in the United States, and I only bring up the Mexican part because, in Mexico, doing theater is not something that people consider. Like, it wasn't ever even a thought in my head that would be a part of my life, because I didn't think that anybody did that for a living, because it's not a real job. I thought it was like a hobby that somebody had. So I always loved theater, and I was always writing little plays, and I was the cousin that made all the cousins get together and put on a show about the family at Christmas. But when I was in high school, I thought I would end up in politics. Or, honestly, my first dream was to be a soccer goalie. Football, I think, for you. And yeah. I was obsessed with soccer, so that was my first dream.
And soccer would have been, like, I think Ireland played Mexico in the World Cup in '94, if you remember that.
Yes, I totally remember that game.
You guys
Pat
bet us.
Bonner was your goalie.
He was. And your keeper was a flamboyant kind of guy as well, wasn't he? He had a very colourful jersey.
Yeah, so that guy was my hero growing up. So that's who I wanted to be, was Jorge Campos, that guy. That colorful jersey.
Yeah. Very,
so funny.
Very funny.
Yeah.
And so soccer was a big thing, or football. Obviously, Mexico have a big pedigree in the sport. How far did you go with that? Was it just a pipe dream? Were you pretty good?
I was good for where I was, which was like, schools in Texas and the U.S. I played a little bit for the Texas Olympic team. That was like the furthest I ever got. But the truth is, I wasn't that good. But, when you're 14, you believe that you are that good. And I did have aspirations for that. Okay. Oh, sorry, there's an ambulance driving by. Sorry about that.
All right, no worries. As long as you're okay, that's the main thing.
Yeah.
So sport was a big deal, but politics. So where did the interest in politics come from?
My family was always. I have really wonderful memories of sitting around the dinner table. I have two brothers and my mother and father, and I have really nice memories of us. We always talked about what was going on in the world, and I really appreciated that. For my dad, that was important, I think, that we care. And my dad cares a lot. He cares a great deal about politics. And so it was just something I was always thinking about. Also, like Christmases in Mexico, I remember there would be like 20 people around the table arguing about the next presidential election in Mexico, or in Mexico, we talk a lot about American politics. So it was just always something I had an interest in.
But not something, I guess, did you kind of start running for in high school? I suppose there's kind of elections and things like that to kind of dip your toe in the water. Any of that sort of activity happen?
No, what I got into was activism. It was really, I worked for Amnesty International, actually. So when I graduated high school, I moved back down to Mexico from Texas, from the United States, and I worked for Amnesty International for a year. And that was really great, but really disheartening, because for me, working in the nonprofit world was really hard because it's so much work. It's actually funny that I ended up in acting because it's very similar. It's so much work. You have to put in so much of your time and effort. It feels very important, and it can be very, you can run up against disillusion a lot because, I cared very much about human rights, and as much as I tried to make my fellow students in Mexico care about human rights, it didn't seem to matter to them, and that was really difficult for me at 17. And so I think I quit because of that. I just had such a hard time with how apathetic everybody seemed to be about this thing that I cared so much about. Which is funny that I ended up in theater because it's the same thing.
We definitely can get to that, but as a 17-year-old, it is probably, you would be on the minority massively that would try and pursue a kind of follow a career in giving back and you know, in that world. But was there a decision point made as to say, this is what I want to do coming out of college, or what brought you to it?
Well, so I had a friend of mine in high school who I really looked up to and I thought was kind of a very cool guy. And he was the first person I ever saw wear a Che Guevara shirt, you know?
Yeah.
And I didn't know who Che Guevara was, but I was, you know, he told me about him and I was like, whoa, that sounds like a really cool, radical person, you know? And then he gave me this giant biography of Che Guevara that was like this thick for those watching. And I read it cover to cover, and it really kind of, I think, was a changing point in my life, because I thought, well, that's what I want to do. I want to be Mexico's Che Guevara, if you will. And what I love about being young is that I actually believe that. I really, really strongly believe that was something I could be and that I would be. And so that's what made me go to Mexico.
Wow. Interesting. And to have this, was that vision or that self-belief that you could actually do it. I know when we're young, some people are very much like that. Others might be a bit more introverted maybe, and self-doubt would be kind of high on the radar, but it doesn't sound like that was the case for you. But so was creativity part of what was forming in you as well? Obviously, if you get into the acting world, there must be something underneath that was coming up.
Well, so my grandmother was a poet in Mexico, and I think that's where all my craziness comes from, is her. And I, since I was in the 5th grade, wrote like poems. And in high school, I wrote a lot of rhyming poetry that when I go back home and I open those notebooks makes me laugh, because it's all like, you know, my heart broken apart, you know, things like that. Okay. Very, very deep, profound stuff.
Right.
But I have always loved writing. It's always been a part of my life.
Okay. And so talk to me a little bit after the year of Amnesty, and did that knock your confidence, knock your belief system? Did you say
big
right?
time? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened was, I'll never forget it. I was sitting in my bedroom in Texas, and my mom and I had my bags packed to go back to Mexico, because I was going for my 2nd year of university there. And my mom called me basically saying, you know, we're leaving, we got to get in the car. And I couldn't move. I literally could not stand up from my bed. And I remember my mom walking into the room, and she just hugged me, and she knew that I didn't want to go back. And it was such a, I mean, it's interesting that you say about having that confidence, is that I'm very lucky, and I grew up with parents who gave me the belief that I could do anything, right? So that was one of the first times in my life where I came up against something very difficult, you know, and where I wasn't, I mean, it sounds very privileged, and I was. I don't pretend that I wasn't. And so I was paralyzed, I think, in defeat and in self-doubt and in fear, you know. I just couldn't go back. I wasn't ready to, I didn't want to be in that space anymore. And I felt so sad, you know, about putting in so much time and wanting to help people and people not caring. And it was, you know, I mean, now I wish I could talk to the 17-year-old me and, you know, give advice. But at that moment, I'll never forget that moment, just sitting there.
And it sounds almost like, you know, looking back, it sounds like some sort of almost a meltdown or a breakdown to a certain extent, because if it's what I'm detecting from you as a person, and, you know, very happy-go-lucky, I would imagine, and positive, but it's almost the first time you had to hit these negative emotions, and I suppose it just sounds profound in a way that it paralyzed you.
When I go to the bad side, it can be really, really overwhelming, you know? And it's funny, I always laugh that I became an actor, because so much of now my profession is being told no, and, you know, getting very close and almost. And So it's funny. But that was my first sort of brush with that.
Right. It's interesting. Yeah, like I talked to another guy on the podcast a while back, and we were talking about failure, and I suppose getting used to losing or to failure. He played golf a lot. He was a professional golfer at one stage, and he said it's a game where you fail nearly all the time because so rarely anyone wins consecutive tournaments, like unless you're Tiger Woods or whatever. And that he said that helped him prepare to becoming working in business and in leadership, that you make mistakes, you fail regularly, you get on with it. So it's just kind of an interesting parallel, as you said, with acting. If you're going to this audition now and there's 50 guys there with you, one of them's going to get it, so you probably, your percentages of getting the gig is probably quite low, but you get comfortable with that in a weird way.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because you get used to it, you get comfortable, but last night I was talking to a friend of mine, and she and I were saying how even though you start to think that you're okay with the constant rejection, and you do get better at it, I now, when I leave an audition, I don't expect to book it. That doesn't mean I don't book things. I do, and I work, but I don't leave with hope because it's not useful for me. But I think that yourself for years and years that you may not even be aware of. Like, I do think that being in a profession like this where you're constantly failing, it wears on you, whether or not you realize it or not.
Interesting. But so the audition, like, just as an example, today you said you're going to go in and out, it's a line, so it's not really about talent, it's just about other maybe criteria, but when you're going for a bigger audition and you put more effort into it and you come out of that thinking I nailed that one, do you kind of know when you come out of them how well you've done, or do you kind of again just say, look, I think I gave it my best shot, I have no idea if that's good enough here?
Well, the crazy thing is sometimes you'll leave an audition and think, well, that, I'll see them on set. That was the best audition I've ever given. And you don't hear a thing. And then sometimes you leave an audition and you think it went terribly, and then they call you and they say, you booked it. Yeah. So it's hard. I again have, because of years and years of doing this, I now don't trust myself. But yes, you have. It's my brother and I joke, we're big soccer fans, as I've mentioned, and my brother and I always say it's the hope that gets you, right? Like in this World Cup, Mexico started the World Cup by beating Germany. And so all of the sudden, before the World Cup, I had no hope. I thought Mexico can't win the World Cup. And then when we beat Germany, so now I have hope, and now I believe that we can win. And then we lose to Sweden, of all countries. And then I'm just crushed because I had the hope. Whereas before the World Cup, I wouldn't have thought we would have lost to Sweden. So sometimes you leave an audition thinking, oh, I just nailed that. It gives you hope. And so it's much more painful when you don't book it. So I try to not give myself that hope, but I am human,
Yeah, well, as somebody from Ireland, our levels of hope are quite low in the football world at the moment anyway, so we don't even get the hope at this point in time. Very, very good. So talk to me about moving more then after that paralyzing event, the next stage of your, I suppose, journey. When did the whole acting thing start becoming an option?
Well, so I moved back so I stayed in Houston, and my parents said, look, you have to go to university here. We can't, you're not going to take a semester off. Because they, I think, feared correctly that if I took a semester off, I would probably never go to college. And so they said, just go to the local public university and sign up for 2 or 3 classes. We don't even care, just any classes, just so that you're going to a school. And so I went and I signed up for a philosophy class, a history class, and an acting class. And in my head, I was just kind of choosing randomly. But now that I look back, I think my subconscious was at play. I'd done theater in high school, and I really loved it. And it's funny, I was actually speaking in therapy about this. When I was in Mexico, there was a theater near the university, but it was out of the way of my walk home. But I would always take the longer route home to walk past the theater. But I never walked into that theater. It's so crazy. But now looking back, I'm like, oh, I always wanted to do this. I think I was scared to even think it out loud. But as soon as I took that acting class at the University of Houston with a woman named Carolyn Boone, who I'm going to mention because I love her so much because she changed my life. After that first class, I knew what I wanted to do with my life. I just knew it. I was like, oh, this is my favorite thing in the world, is theater, and this is what I want to do. And
was it just the feeling of being fully alive when you were doing it, or what was the actual kind of the crux of it?
It felt like home, you know?
Mm.
Like, I'm sure you feel this way when you're doing the podcast, right? Like, there's this feeling that some things give you where it just feels, it's not that it's easy, because it's not easy, but it feels comfortable. It feels like I should be doing this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It just like, I understood that room. I understood that woman. I understood that there was something we were striving for that felt important to us in that room. And I like that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And still to this day, my favorite part of my career is being in a black room, in a black box, and trying to figure out how to tell a story. That still is my favorite thing. And I remember leaving that day going, yeah, this is what I want.
And as you kind of got more and more into it from just reading on your website and doing a bit of research, it wasn't just the actual acting part, it was the writing piece, right?
Yeah, well, that is actually the part I care about the most, because as an actor, you are kind of a cog in someone else's machine. But when you write a play, it's your life, you know, it's your voice. And I really, that to me is so fulfilling, because that's the one place in my life where I get to say, this is what I think about the world, you know, and really express myself, which also makes it really nerve-wracking, because like people always say, what makes you more nervous, your play going up or you being in a play? It's my play going up, because if I'm, as an actor, I'm in a play that people don't like, it's not really my fault.
Yeah.
But if people go to a play that I wrote and they don't like it, they don't like me. You know, that's what it feels like. It's not the truth, but that's what it feels like.
Sure. There's a lot more of an attachment, I would imagine, to the...
Yeah.
So the process of putting a play together, writing it, that's something you just learn as you go? Did you do a lot of training for that, a mix of everything?
Well, what really happened was, you know, being in plays, you know, I was reading a lot of plays, and then the writing, it's kind of you learn by doing, right? Like my first play that I ever wrote, if I read it now, I think it probably would be embarrassed by it. But at the time, I thought it was really good, you know? But then you write a second play and you learn from that first play, but it's kind of a trial by fire sort of, you know, experience. And so I guess the way, I've never taken a class on how to write a play, but I've written a lot of plays.
Right.
So, and I hope they get better.
Do they normally take the same structure? Like, is there a set framework that you have to follow for a typical play, or is it very free form?
Well, most of my writing happens around midnight after a couple glasses of wine, and then it's just like kind of babbling improvisation, just throwing spaghetti against the wall and hoping something happens. And I can usually write a first draft very quickly. I can like vomit out 80 terrible pages. And then the actual writing is the year or two of fixing that, sort of trying to dig through that and figure out what I was trying to say. But I actually think the wine is important, because I'm able to access sort of like the pain or the sort of thing that I'm trying to wrestle with in my own life, you know? If that makes sense.
No, it does. It definitely does. I kind of have similar stuff going on sometimes in my own mind to try and do, if it's a project, if it's a writing piece, to just try and get it out. But getting it out is the easy part. It's kind of making it I suppose good enough. Like, when does it become good enough for you? Because like there's the perfectionism versus good enough. How does that struggle play out?
Well, it's usually other people who give you permission that it's ready, right? For me, at least. I am someone who, I wish this wasn't true in me, but I care very deeply about what other people think. But so with writing, what'll happen is I will write a first draft, and then I'll kind of polish it a little bit, and then finally I'll get to the point where I know I have to invite 3 or 4 friends to come over and read it, just to hear it. And then you'll hear it out loud, and then, one thing that I wish I had known earlier is how important who those friends is, because now I have like a very select group of friends whose feedback I trust and who I want. Because early on, what would happen is I would invite everyone I knew, and then I actually ruined a lot of plays by putting in bad feedback into them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and so I now have this sort of like these 4 friends here in LA who I love, and I actually am in the middle of writing a new play right now, and I know that in like 2 weeks I'll have them all over and we'll read my new play. And then they'll give me feedback, and then I'll keep writing, and until one of them goes like, hey, we should put it on now.
Okay.
Once one of them is like, so when are we doing this? Then I go, okay, the play's ready.
Right. Very cool. And going back to the fair piece, though, I suppose when you're used to it, and in the early stages, if you were putting that first draft together and you get people in the room, how do you detach yourself from caring what people think from a point of view of not taking it personally to looking at it to try and make it better?
I would give you $1 million if you could help me not take it personally and not care. I never am able to lose that. I will always care very deeply what people think of my work.
But you're caring versus getting insulted by it is different, right? I would imagine. So it's kind of knowing that they want to help you improve.
And that's part of finding who these people are that you trust, right?
Right.
Because what will happen is sometimes people who don't know how to give feedback will say something that will hurt you personally. But people who understand that we're just in the room to fix the play, like I always jokingly say, but I really mean this, I love an argument in a rehearsal room if it's about the piece. I can yell with you for hours if what it's about is how to make this scene better, right? Or how to make this joke funnier. That I can argue about for hours. It's when it becomes personal that it's hard, that then you do take it personally. But for me, when I invite these friends over and they give me feedback on my play, I don't take it personally because I know they're trying to help me make the play better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It makes sense. So you've obviously had a number of those plays in New York. You lived in New York for a while. Was that where you started to kind of get your first shows on, I suppose, what's the term, on stage? The produced, I guess, so it was in New York. When I was in New York, I took a class from a playwright, David Barkatz, when I first got there. And his line was, if you want to be a playwright, lock yourself in your apartment for a weekend, don't answer the phone, and don't leave until you've written the words end of play. Right.
And he said that, and so that weekend I did just that. And I wrote my first, I'd written things, in high school and stuff, but my first actual play. And it was a very pretentious play about Marlon Brando that was not very good, but it got a couple readings. And then, and that made me feel excited that there were parts of the play that I thought were good and people liked. And so then I wrote another play that was called The Redhead is Coming. There was a comedy about a couple that has a threesome, and that play got produced. That was my first play that was produced in New York. And that was really exciting for me because one of my dear friends was in it, this guy Jorge Cordova, who's an amazing actor, and he was wonderful in the play, and people laughed, and that matters to me a lot. I like comedy a lot, and that felt good that I wrote something that made people laugh. So yeah, that's where all that got started.
Interesting. So just even for somebody that's not aware of that kind of process, you put it together, you kind of pitch it. How do you pitch the play? Do you have to kind of get people in a room to do a reading, or how does that all work?
Yeah, so the life of a playwright is terrible. I don't recommend anyone do this, but the way that plays happen is you write your play, you invite your friends over, and then hopefully, because you've been involved in theater somehow, you know some people at some theaters. And so then you send your play and hope desperately that one of those people will read it. And then the first sort of thing that you have to pass is once people like it enough, they will give you what's called a reading, which is actors behind music stands reading your play for an audience. Usually the audience does not pay for this. And that is sort of theaters testing out whether or not they want to do your play for real. Because a play, especially in New York, costs, like $80,000 is a cheap off Broadway production, right? So what you're asking someone is to give you about $150,000 to put on your play.
Okay.
And so the leap from we will let you read it behind music stands for free to I will give you $150,000. That's the key, my friend.
But you were able to do that with your first play, though, or your second play, really. That leap happened for that second play, the Redhead. Redhead is coming.
It's coming, yeah. It did happen, but it was at a smaller. It was part of a festival. It was sort of like my first in was. This was a theater that sat like 35 people in Brooklyn.
Okay.
Where like my cast had to show up 20 minutes before the play, put up our 4 pretend set pieces, because after our play finished, another play went up with a different set,
Right. So
it was someone saying, yes, we'll do your play, but it was definitely like, first tier, right? It was like, we were not in, all my analogies will be about soccer today, but we weren't in the Premier League yet, right? We were like in the championship,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So, as you were doing that, and obviously booking gigs in acting around in parallel, right? So acting was paying the bills, and you're probably following more of the passion in the playwriting.
Yes, without a doubt. It's funny because now at this point in my life, acting is not my passion anymore. I like it and I enjoy it, but it's almost like how I pay my bills. It's almost my day job.
Yeah.
Like I do a lot of commercials. That's how I am able to have a wife and a son, and pay for things.
Right.
And I could care less about that. Like I literally have no passion for commercials, and I actually think it's why I book them, because this is a difficult thing for a brain to accept, or for me to accept as an idealist. But I actually think that not caring makes me successful in that world. Because I go into those auditions and I don't care.
Yeah.
I could care less. What is the line? Ford is the best in Texas? Great. Okay, here it is. Like, I don't care. And so I've had success in that world. Whereas in playwriting, I care so deeply. I mean, I won't sleep the night before a play opens. When I'm in the audience, I'm a neurotic mess. But for that, I make no money. I mean, there's no money in playwriting.
Yeah.
Nobody should go into playwriting to make money. Even the best playwrights, they make money writing for TV.
Okay. It's interesting though. Like, obviously, I'm not making any money doing podcasting. It's my passion at the moment as well, and my day job is what certainly pays for all of this stuff. But your point of doing the commercials because you just don't care. You're obviously acting. You're playing a role in doing that, and it's kind of totally detaching yourself from the emotion, even though it's something you not just don't care about, don't believe in. It's just I don't know. There's something triggering in my mind there that I totally get, but it makes total sense.
And I think that's it's disheartening that the world sometimes reacts to your not caring, right? Like, for me it is, at least. My wife says I always speak for everyone. I'm going to speak for myself. For me, it's very disheartening because you go, well, what's the point, right?
No, yeah. And I think my point there now is just coming back when you said it, though, was you're doing the commercials. you're parking your values or your principles because, it's a means to an end and that's fine. Whereas there's no way you would write a play about something you don't fully believe in and aligns to your values. And, I don't think you're going to write a play for TV like Friends or something. It has to be meaningful to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is, it's a constant struggle for me because in this industry, you do have to kind of put your morals aside a lot, Like last night I was at this event because a sketch that I wrote with a friend of mine was nominated for this award.
Okay.
So I went to this like LA thing. And the only thing that matters about this is that I was in a room with what felt like pressure to be a part of Hollywood. Does that make sense? There's like people in suits and everybody's networking and everybody's throwing cards in each other's faces. And I hate it. I could not hate that more than I cannot explain to you how much I hate that.
I get a good sense of it though. Yeah. No, go on.
Yeah. So I'm just like at this thing and there is the part of me that is a new dad that goes like, hey, suck it up and go talk to that woman because that woman could hire you one day and at least say hi and get over yourself because you have to send your kid to college one day. But then there's the part of me that goes, but what about my soul? And what am I going to do with that if I keep having these fake conversations with people? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just go back and forth, and then eventually I'll have enough wine that I will talk to strangers and I don't care anymore.
Yeah, I hear you. So is authenticity not really valued in that world? Or does anyone give a shit? Do they just say, you have the right look and you have the right ability to express yourself, that's it? Or would people say, you know what, Bernardo's very authentic. I think that's really a unique quality in this world, and he can bring some value.
Well, I think that authenticity is valued, but I think there is a lot of pretending to be authentic. Now I'm going to sound so negative, but like at this event last night, everybody kept talking about diversity and inclusion, and these are things that I care very deeply about. But last night, I stopped caring about it because it felt like people were trying to authentically care about the thing that everybody cares about. And so it felt ridiculous. And I just kept laughing to myself because every time somebody went up on stage, they gave like a little political spiel, but it felt like, and people were introduced as actor/activist.
Oh, God.
And that made me laugh because I was like, what? And the truth is, this is about my own hypocrisy. I think I would consider myself an actor/activist, but I would never introduce myself to anyone that way. So my question to myself is, why does it make you so upset that someone else is at least owning that they are both those things? And I think for me, it's that there feels something inauthentic about it. Anyway, and now I'm just like blabbing at you, but this is like, I just experienced this yesterday. And I was my friend and I were laughing so much last night because everything was like, before we begin, let's think of the people of Mexico, or whatever. Right. And I obviously care about those things, but I'm like, in this context, in this theater, with everyone in suits, and it just feels not real.
Yeah, it's funny. The comparison I would have a little bit in the kind of corporate world, and this whole, in the last 4 or 5 years, I've really got into meditation, and it's been very beneficial for me to kind of slow pace down and get to know myself better, right? And the whole kind of inward looking and emotional intelligence comes up in that, but in the same sort of way, a lot of organizations and the world at large is probably jumping on the meditation bandwagon a little bit because it's important to say, this is important, and but it's just a buzzword, and it can be just used for potential financial gain. Because I see people talking about meditation and posting about it, and I get a sense that some of them are very genuine, and others you just can see there's probably something behind it that question mark, I'm not sure of. So it's interesting to kind of hear that.
And I understand the desire to want to be a part of something, right? Like that I get. I get why people do it, because I do it too, I'm sure, in many ways. Like when you're a kid and there's a kids on the playground, and if they're all playing hide and go seek, you want to also play hide and go seek, right? You want to be a part of the thing that everybody's doing. And because of social media, everybody is posting political things about inclusion and things like that now. And so everybody wants to be involved. I get that. I think that's totally fine. But it just drives me crazy. I just want to, I'm just desperate for somebody to get up on stage and say something funny,
Yeah. Or get
and
up
there were
on,
people who did it.
But even get up on stage and say, you're probably, if you did it, you're probably kind of ruining your future career in that industry. But just say, hey, everybody in the room here, you're all being inauthentic or very something blasé about that.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. It's kind of an interesting view into the world you're in there. Was there a point, do you think, in the last few years that seesaw, that switch happened where you were seeing it almost from the third person a lot more than just kind of going along with it and stepping away from?
Yeah, I mean, I think over the last 2 or 3 years, there has been a change in me. I don't know what it is, but I tend to think existentially, and I just keep thinking to myself, what's the point, And that seems to matter a great deal to me. I don't have an answer. I have no answers to what's the point. But I know it's the same thing that we were talking about when I walked into that acting class. I felt that there was a point in there. And it felt nice, and it felt like home, And I am now trying to only surround myself with moments that feel that way. And so it's funny because I've started leaving things or kind of parting ways with things that I was involved in because I felt I had to be. And now I'm starting to I only want to hang out with people that I like and that make me feel like there's a point. Whether that point is there or not, I'm interested in pursuing that feeling of liking it and feeling good about myself and about the people that I'm spending time with. Does that make sense? Because in this town, there's a lot of pressure to hang out with the people that can get you somewhere. And it may be a detriment to my career, but I don't think I want to do that. I think I want to work with successful, great, talented people, but I want to work with them because I really like them, It's like if Sacha Baron Cohen, who is one of my heroes, was walking right in front of me right now, I would get out and say something to him, but not because I want him to, it's because I genuinely like him.
Sure.
And I'm interested in pursuing that feeling of hanging out with people that I've repeated myself 5 times, but yeah.
No. And, look, I do try, I like the random conversations. It's important to because it's normal, but it is good to kind of extract some stuff from that, and it's about finding your own voice, I suppose, your own views of the world, and adhering and sticking to it. It makes total sense. So what's next on the radar for you? And I didn't mention at the start, right? You've played roles in a lot of TV shows, a lot of movies. You've had a good acting career so far. Is there what's next on the horizon for you? What's next on your?
Well, as an actor, the next thing on my plan is to keep booking things so that I can pay for my son and his life. And I would love to be on a TV show, not because it will fulfill me, but because I could really set up my life so that I could write all the time and hang out with my son all the time, which is interesting. But that's where I'm at right now emotionally with that. So that's how I feel about that. And then on the horizon for my plays, I wrote a play that was done here in Los Angeles called The Giant Void in My Soul, and that play did very well here. And I have a reading coming up in December in New York of it, which I'm very excited about because I really hope it happens there as well. And I'm writing 2 new plays. One, so the next thing is to hope that those things happen. So yeah, and just keep creating and auditioning and, hoping it happens.
Yeah. You mentioned you're an idealist earlier on as well. I just picked up on that. What does that mean? What does that mean for you?
Well, it's funny. I guess I said that. Now I'm like wondering, am I actually an idealist? I was an idealist at one point. I mean, I tend to be a dreamer, and I have I think my tendency is to be optimistic, but the older I get, the harder it is to fully embrace that energy in myself. But I do, at the end of the day, like a sweeping, happy ending. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. Now I'm just thinking if I actually am still an idealist. But I was at one point, very strongly.
I'm trying to ask probing questions here.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Please.
And what about, get a sense that the world you're in can beat you down a little bit and can be challenging to pick yourself back up no matter how many times it happens. What are your kind of approaches to bounce back? What makes you resilient, or how have you developed that?
Well, the main thing is your community, right? Your friends. I mean, the number one thing that helps me bounce back is my wife. My wife is really amazing, and she puts up with all the highs and lows of my career, and she is just a really great friend, someone that I can talk to, share my insecurities with, share my sort of, my wife is a film editor. She's a documentary film editor, and so she and I get to live through each other's successes and our failures and our almost, and without her, I really mean this. I think I would probably gain about 150 pounds, move to Las Vegas, and become a professional sports gambler. That's really, because I have that in me, and I could really become that person, So she's the main thing that helps me. And now my son, not to get cliche, but, my son has really given me such a wonderful thing to go home to, Yeah. And it really puts things in perspective. It's hard to not every day look at my son and realize how unimportant, even this event I was at last night. When I was 25, I would have felt very proud and I would have thought it mattered a great deal,
sure,
what happened last night. And I'm happy it happened, and I'm proud, and I'm excited for my friend, but I mostly am like, okay, this is kind of silly. I can't wait to go hang out with my son. Because that's a really nice thing to have, and to, watch a human being become a person. It's really kind of miraculous.
Very cool. Yeah, we're expecting in January as well, so I'm looking forward to that experience.
Oh, congratulations. My son was born in January. Oh, wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Well, good luck. It'll ruin your life, my friend.
Yeah, I'm already trying to streamline this production of podcasting so that I'd have less time to edit, I'd imagine. Just on that topic, you used to do podcasts yourself in New York, right? So that was something.
Uh-huh.
How was that experience for you?
I loved it. The thing that happened, though, I made the mistake of making a podcast that was about a very specific thing. And I think that kind of limited my audience. So I did a podcast called Off and On, a New York theater podcast, for about 4 years. And I interviewed, the point I was interested in interviewing people, in most podcasts, there's that moment where the person says, and then I made it. And so that's kind of the story. And I was interested in these people in New York who haven't, quote unquote, made it, but they continue being theater people. And what makes a person crazy enough to be 50 and go to an audition, And it was great. And what happened was I started the podcast, and then all of a sudden I had 5,000 downloads an episode.
Wow. Very
quickly. I was like, whoa, oh my God, people are listening to this.
That's good.
And then it just stayed there.
Okay.
For 5 years.
Oh.
And what happened was at one point I just went, I've done this. I loved it, but I'm never going to make any money from it. And then I left New York, and I thought, well, this is a good time to stop doing it. But I love doing it. I love sitting down and talking to people, and I understand your passion for it. I really miss doing it. It's just hard to find the time to do it. It's so much work.
It is. It's work. Again, I enjoy these conversations and talk to, as I always say, I wouldn't be talking to you right now if I didn't have the podcast, right? So
Yeah,
chances are we wouldn't, unless we were playing for Ireland and Mexico in some sort of World Cup in the future, and that's not going to happen either. But it's great for connecting people and to get to know, different viewpoints and just it's a brilliant outlet, and it's a great networking opportunity. Again, as long as you're doing it for the right reasons. A lot of there was International Podcast Day about a month ago, and I did a presentation around things I've learned doing podcasting, and from what I've talked to people that have gone in with their maybe eyes wide closed or eyes wide shut, from the point of view thinking they're going to get millions of downloads and millions of followers within their first few episodes. It doesn't work that way, and if that's your vision or mission for it, chances are you'll probably do about 5 episodes and give up. So it has to be, you have to be clear on why you're doing it, I think. It makes it all worthwhile when we're chatting to different folks from all over the world. It's really cool.
Yeah, and what I like about it is it forces I like getting into deep conversations quickly with people, and in podcast land, it's like expected, Yeah. Whereas like at a bar, you have to like do 1 or 2 hours of funny, chit chat to get into the good stuff,
Yeah. Very good. I'm conscious of time, and I know you probably have to get into the audition room soon enough. I normally wrap up in a kind of it's not very unique, but I like it, around recommendations of books or even plays or anything from your world that you would recommend a listener check out that could help them improve in some way that has had an impact on you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I would recommend, I don't know if it's in Netflix internationally, but my wife did a documentary called Another World, which I recommend a lot.
Okay. That
is about the Occupy Wall Street movement. And I actually recommend it a lot for these political times and sort of like feeling disillusioned and stuff. But It's a really cool story about these kids who took over a park in New York, and they really wanted to change the world. And I think they did, because they may not have brought down Wall Street, but now everybody says the 99% and the 1%. And they invented, that's them. Oh. So I think that's pretty cool that they made us think about it. So it's not to plug my wife. I really think it's just a really cool movie. It's out there. I recommend people check that out. Yeah. And then, if you don't read plays or you're not a theater person, read Waiting for Godot. It's the best play ever written. I love it.
Waiting for,
That's my favorite play. Waiting for Godot.
Godot.
Yeah. Waiting for Godot. It's the best play ever written. It's Samuel Beckett. He's my favorite playwright. It's really great. Yeah.
Brilliant. 2 good ones there. I definitely will check out the Another World, the documentary. We're big Netflix folks here, so we'll dive into that. Bernardo, it was great chatting to you. Same here. It definitely felt like a good conversation with somebody I had talked to before a few times, so that always hopefully comes across when people listen, and hear the journey you're on, not only right now in your vehicle, but in general. There's kind of multiple journeys going on. Brilliant to chat. Best of luck with that, and definitely stay in touch. We want to track your progress and keep me posted on how the play goes in the reading in New York. That'll be exciting.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you for being flexible with me being in the car.
I think it adds a more authentic nature to the sound quality. Anyway, I hope so. Very good.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bernardo. Have a good one. Best of luck.
Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. So, how did you find it? A good show? Hopefully. Do take a second or two to let me know. And before you do dive off, just a couple of quick call-outs. The new podcast, the 864, 15 minutes long, in fact 864 seconds is the aspiration, is now out and ready for listening. Check it out on the site. Go to the podcast page. There's a link for 864 there, or go on to Apple Podcasts and subscribe. That would be awesome. The 864 is all you have to search for. And it's in all other podcast platforms that you can think of or should be. So, have a listen. Every week I release a 1 Minute Monday video clip, which is also a tip to hopefully make you 1% better. Check that out. It's on the website on the video page. Did you also know that only about 1% of listeners to podcasts, not just my own but all, leave a rating, leave a review, get in touch or give feedback, and I would love if we could buck that trend and put it to 2% for this one. So please do take the time to give me a bit of feedback, give me some ideas about future guests or whatever the hell comes into mind. Just get in touch or rate or review the podcast on Apple. That helps. I'm available at all of the social platforms, pretty much all, at Rob of the Green. That's either with or without the @ sign, but you'll find it under that moniker, so hopefully I'll hear from you there. Last couple of quick ones. Support. So I do offer some pro bono coaching. Get onto the website, the support page, to get in touch. Few hours a month, happy to do that. And if you would like to support the podcast, that would be awesome. You can do so through Patreon and also through purchasing books through the book page on the website. That goes through Amazon and we get a little percentage. I'm not even sure what, but it's something. And finally, just to say thanks for taking the time to listen to the podcast. I know there's lots of other shows out there. It means a lot that you're checking this one out. So have a great rest of day, week, month, year, whatever it may be, and hopefully you're getting 1% better as a result of these shows. Take care and good luck.